I've never been one to give away my trust left and right. Trust had to be earned, and few people ever did. Eleanor called it a disadvantage. I considered it an advantage. 73 years of life had only strengthened my position. It's been raining all day today. I sit at the window of my city apartment and stare out at the wet asphalt and gray buildings of Lee's Summit. A stray cat hides under the visor of a neighbor's entryway, a clever creature, unlike my son. Anthony has always been soft, just like his mother, sensitive, trusting, ready to see the good in everyone he met. Eleanor adored that trait, but it made me wary. The world isn't made for soft people. The world chews them up and spits them out. I was born in the post-war era when nobody gave you anything for nothing. My father worked in a factory. My mother worked as a seamstress in an atelier. My childhood was spent in a small apartment with a leaky roof and a perpetual smell of damp. All that I have now, a network of antique stores, a city apartment, and a country house, I created with my own hands. No one put a silver spoon in my mouth at birth. Anthony got everything on a silver platter. A prestigious education, startup capital for his business, connections. And what? He never learned to appreciate the value of work and money. I'm not really surprised, though. It's hard to appreciate something you didn't fight for. Eleanor died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Aggressive, like herself in her rare moments of anger. 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. She left in October when the maples around our country house turned her favorite orange color. Eleanor was a buffer between Anthony and me. She softened my words, explained my actions to my son, found compromises where I saw only principles. With her gone, the gulf between us became unbridgeable. The rain is getting heavier. The cat under the visor huddles against the wall. My thoughts returned to Eleanor. We met when I was 27. I just opened my first antique store, a tiny store with shabby books, old coins, and random items I could find at flea markets and thrift stores. Eleanor walked in on a rainy day, much like today, looking for a gift for her father. She chose an antique copper inkwell. I remember the sunlight that suddenly broke through the clouds and illuminated her brown hair as she leaned over to look at the display case. 6 months later, we were married. Another year later, Anthony was born. Eleanor left her job as a school librarian to raise her son while I grew the business. We were happy, really happy, for 43 years together. We bought a country house for our 20th wedding anniversary. A small but cozy cottage 40 minutes from the city. 2 floors, 4 bedrooms, a terrace overlooking the lake. Eleanor had transformed it from an ordinary house to a place she wanted to come back to. She personally selected every detail of the interior, from the wallpaper with a small floral pattern to the vintage doorknobs I found at an auction. This house was our sanctuary, a place where we spent weekends, celebrations, vacations, where we greeted sunrises with a cup of coffee on the terrace and saw off sunsets with a glass of wine in hand, where Eleanor planted a rose garden that still blooms every summer. After she died, I couldn't live there permanently. Too many memories. Her absence was felt too strongly in the rooms where every object had been chosen by her. I moved back to the city apartment, visiting the house only occasionally, to check if everything was okay and to spend a couple days alone with the memories. My relationship with Anthony had become strained long before Eleanor's death. The first serious disagreement began when he turned 19. He decided to drop out of business school, which he had enrolled in at my urging, and pursue music. Eleanor supported him. I was totally against it. Music should remain a hobby, I said at the time. You can't support yourself playing guitar in bars. You just don't believe in me, Anthony replied. I never did. That wasn't true. I believed in his abilities, but I also believed in the importance of a stable future. He eventually graduated from high school but refused to work in the family business. Instead, he started his own music recording studio. Not particularly successful, to put it bluntly. Then Olivia came along. They met at some music festival 6 years ago. 3 months later, Anthony announced their engagement. I sensed something wrong right away. There was something in her eyes, a cold calculation behind the mask of enthusiasm. The way she'd appraised our house on her first visit. The way she'd casually inquired about my business, as if probing the ground. Eleanor thought I was being unfair to the girl. "You're just afraid she'll take your son away from you," she said to me one evening after they left. "She already has," I replied, "and that's not the point. She's with him for the money." "What money, Harrison?" Eleanor laughed. "Anthony barely makes ends meet with his studio. If she was after money, she'd pick someone richer." "She's not after his money, she's after mine." Eleanor shook her head and never brought it up again. But time has proven me right. After the wedding, Olivia began gently hinting at financial help. First for Anthony's studio, then for a down payment on an apartment, then for renovations. The list grew. The wedding was modest. Eleanor insisted we pay for it, even though traditionally it was the bride's parents' responsibility. But Olivia's family didn't have the means. Her father, Lloyd, was an accountant for a small company. Her mother, Helena, was a freelance photographer. Decent people, no argument, but completely spineless and financially irresponsible. At the wedding, I met Olivia's parents for the first time. Lloyd, a thin man with thinning hair, was always talking about his grandiose business ideas that somehow never materialized. Helena, a woman with an overly loud laugh and a habit of interrupting, was constantly taking pictures of the crowd with a shabby camera that she said cost a fortune. "Excellent reception," Lloyd said to me when we were alone at the bar. "I can see that you don't skimp on family gatherings." "I don't skimp on what I think is important," I replied dryly. "A reasonable approach." He lowered his voice. "By the way, I've been nurturing the idea of an investment project for a long time. It's a very promising market, and the profit is guaranteed. Maybe we could discuss it over lunch sometime?" I politely declined. From then on, Lloyd offered me unique investment opportunities every time we met. Helena was subtler. She simply admired every single thing in my home, especially the antiques, emphasizing how she missed such beauty in their humble abode. After Anthony and Olivia married, our relationship became even more strained. I'd seen her whisper something in his ear before he'd broached the subject of money. I'd seen her smile contentedly as I gave in to Eleanor's requests and wrote another check for the young family's emergency needs. One day I asked my son bluntly, "Do you want that money yourself, or is Olivia insisting?" His face turned purple. "Don't you dare blame my wife. She cares more about our future than you do." Eleanor, hearing our conversation, then reprimanded me. "You can't keep blaming Olivia for all the problems. She's become part of our family whether you want her to or not." I remained silent, but I stood by my opinion. Family was blood and years of bonding, not a piece of paper from the registry office. Certainly not a reason to reach into my wallet. Olivia came from a family where money never lingered. Her parents lived large but without reserves. Fancy clothes, restaurants, vacations, all on credit. Helena talked about it with pride, as if living beyond her means was an achievement, not a sign of irresponsibility. Eleanor tried to find common ground with them. She invited Helena and Lloyd to dinners, took them to the theater, introduced them to our friends. But I saw the forced smiles of our old acquaintances, heard the awkward silences after Lloyd's tactlessness or Helena's loud, inappropriate laughter. Their visits to the country house were especially tense. Helena was constantly photographing the interiors for inspiration, though she never once realized any of the ideas. Lloyd explored my whiskey and cognac collection with the enthusiasm of a sommelier, lavishing on what I was saving for special occasions. After one such visit, I discovered that my rare bottle of Japanese whiskey, a gift from a business partner, was half empty. When I mentioned this, Lloyd only shrugged. "Isn't family supposed to share everything?" Eleanor gently chastised me for my pettiness. "It's just alcohol, Harrison. You shouldn't make a problem out of nothing." But it wasn't about the whiskey. It was about the boundaries they constantly violated, in the lack of respect for other people's property. The feeling that they didn't see me as a person, but as a walking ATM machine. When Eleanor was diagnosed with cancer, everything changed. Suddenly, Olivia was a caring daughter-in-law. She brought home-cooked meals, helped with the cleaning, took Eleanor to her treatments. Helena and Lloyd visited often too, bringing useless gifts and recommending exotic treatments that were sure to help someone they knew. I was grateful for the help, but I couldn't help but think it was insincere, especially when I noticed Olivia studying books on probate law when she thought I couldn't see. Or when I heard Helena whispering with Lloyd about the possible value of the antique furniture in our house. Eleanor was fading fast. In recent weeks, she'd been talking about the country house a lot. Promise me you'll keep it, she told me 2 weeks before she died. Don't sell it. It's part of our history. I promise, I said, holding her gaunt hand. And promise me you'll be kinder to Anthony and Olivia. They're young. They make mistakes. But they love you. I got through the first promise. The second one was harder. After Eleanor's death, the visits from the caring family decreased dramatically. Olivia no longer brought home-cooked lunches. Helena and Lloyd never called to see how I was doing. Only Anthony stopped by occasionally, but his visits were short and tense. They usually ended with another request for money. The country house was empty most of the time. I hired a gardener to maintain Eleanor's roses and a housekeeper to clean. I was rarely there myself, a few times a month, usually on weekends. I wandered through the rooms, pored over old photographs, sat on the terrace looking out over the water. A year ago, on the anniversary of Eleanor's death, I asked Anthony to come with me to the country house, spend the day together, remembering her. He declined, citing an important recording session at the studio. How about next weekend? I suggested it. I don't know, Dad. Olivia and I have a lot of plans. The studio was just starting to turn a profit, and we needed to forge iron. Sure, I said. I understand. I went alone. Spent 2 days alone, talking to Eleanor's ghost in empty rooms, remembering her laugh, her scent, the warmth of her hands, thinking about how things had changed with her gone. We were once a real family. Now all that's left of it are the pictures on the walls and the memories that fade with each passing day. The Anthony she loved so much had turned into a man I barely recognized. Or maybe he had always been like that, and I just didn't want to see it. One of the last nights in the hospital, when Eleanor was barely conscious, she opened her eyes suddenly and squeezed my hand tightly. They don't understand, Harrison, she whispered. They don't understand the price of things. Teach them. I wasn't sure who she was talking about, our son, his wife, or her parents. Maybe it was all of them, or maybe it was just the ramblings of a dying man. But those words stuck in my mind. Teach them the price of things. Perhaps that's exactly what I meant to do. The rain outside the window stops. The cat climbs out of its hiding place, treading carefully on the wet slabs. On the opposite side of the street, the evening lights come on. Life goes on, even when yours seems to have stopped. I rise, kneading the joints that are stiff from sitting so long. It's time for dinner. I pull a pre-prepared meal out of the refrigerator, one of the dozens of identical containers I order from a healthy meal delivery service for seniors. Eleanor wouldn't have liked it. She believed food should bring joy, not just be fuel for the body. I eat dinner alone, looking at Eleanor's picture on the dresser. She's smiling, holding a bouquet from her rose garden, taken the last summer before her illness. I remember that day, warm, sunny, filled with the smell of flowers and the sound of her laughter. Perhaps I should spend more time in the country house, back to the roots, to the memories, to the sense of wholeness I lost with her passing. Maybe there I can figure out what's going on with my family and find a way to fulfill Eleanor's last request, to teach them to understand the true cost of things. My first suspicions were raised about 6 months ago when I checked the utility bills. It was usually a formality. The numbers on the bills for the country house rarely changed. The house was empty most of the time. I turned the heating on at minimum in winter to keep the pipes from freezing and turned it off in spring. Water and electricity usage was minimal, and internet and cable TV were on a flat rate. That February evening, I was reviewing my January bills when I noticed an oddity. My electricity usage had nearly tripled from the previous year. I figured it was a mistake, so I put the bill aside to call the electric company in the morning. But when I looked at the water bill, I discovered the same abnormal increase. I called the superintendent who had been in charge of the house in my absence. Mr. Burns, are we having a communications problem? Water leak? A short circuit? Nothing to worry about, Mr. Atwood. I check the house regularly, and all systems are in good working order. Then why have the bills tripled? The pause on the other end was too long. Oh, it must have been the cold winter. We had to turn up the heat to keep the pipes from freezing, and we flushed the water system, and there was a little problem with the water quality. I didn't believe a word of it. The winter was the same as last year, and no one had warned me about water problems. But I decided not to push it, Just said I would stop by this weekend to check things out for myself. I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Atwood, Burns objected hastily. The road's snowed in, and the local authorities can't clear it. Besides, we've started some minor repairs in the parlor. Dust, dirt, stepladders. It sounded reasonable. But still, something was bugging me. What renovations? I didn't authorize any renovations. Your son called and said you approved. There were cracks in the ceiling that had to be fixed before they got worse. So that's it. Anthony, I decided to talk to my son before I did anything else. I called him the next day. Did you give orders for repairs to the country house? Oh, yes, Anthony replied nonchalantly. Cracks appeared on the ceiling in the living room. I thought it would be better to do it right away than to do major repairs later. I was going to tell you, but I forgot. I'm sorry. And you didn't ask my permission? Dad, it's a small thing. Besides, it's my house, too. After all, I grew up there. I bit my tongue to keep from saying that it wasn't the same as owning a house. Anthony had always taken my property as his own, but this was the first time he'd acted behind my back. What else did you do without consulting me? Nothing, he answered a little too quickly. Just some repairs. You should be grateful that I'm taking care of a house that's so important to you. I decided I'd talk to him more seriously when I saw him in person, but Anthony seemed to be avoiding me. Every time I suggested we meet, he had something to do. The studio, clients, an urgent recording session. One time he cited Olivia's cold, another time his own indisposition, and the bills kept mounting. Now on top of the electricity and water, there was an unbelievable heating bill. And this was in March when I usually had already turned off the system. I called the manager again. Burns, what's going on with the heating? Why is it still running at full capacity? It's a cold spring, Mr. Atwood. Night frosts. We were afraid the pipes might be damaged. Turn it off now. Leave it at the minimum if you're so worried about the pipes. Yeah, have to clear it with your son. He's given explicit instructions. I interrupted him. I own the house, Burns. My instructions take precedence. Turn off the heat tonight. He mumbled his agreement and hung up. An hour later, I got a call from Anthony. Why the hell are you canceling my orders? He started without greeting. Your orders? I tried to speak calmly, though I was seething inside. As I recall, I own the house. I pay the bills. I decide what to do there. You said yourself that the house would be mine someday, that I should learn to take care of it. Taking care of it doesn't mean spending my money without asking. The bills have tripled, Anthony. What's really going on? The silence on the other end was more eloquent than any words. Nothing's going on, he finally answered. Just taking care of the house. You should be grateful. I'm going up there this weekend, I said. I want to check it out for myself. No! His voice trailed off into a shout. Then he coughed. I mean, it's not a good time. The renovations are in full swing. You're just going to get in the way of the workers. What renovations, Anthony? First cracks in the ceiling. Now something else? Yeah, roof. We found a leak. We need to get it fixed before the spring rains come. I knew he was lying. The roof was completely renewed 2 years ago before Eleanor died. The warranty from the roofing company was good for another 3 years. I'll call you later, I said. I had a meeting. There was no meeting. I needed time to think. That evening I sat in my office going over the last 6 months of bills. The picture was getting more and more disturbing. As well as utility bills, there were the odd expense for a gardener. Although there was nothing to do in the garden in winter. A bill from a grocery delivery service I'd never heard of. A satellite TV charge with extra sports channels I'd never watched. Someone was clearly living in my house, or at least spent a lot of time there. And that someone couldn't be Anthony. He worked at a studio in town. Olivia? But why would she live 40 minutes from the city? They had an apartment downtown near the studio. My musings were interrupted by the phone ringing. The number was unlisted. Harrison Atwood speaking. Mr. Atwood, this is Nora Pickering, your neighbor at the country house. I vaguely remembered the woman, an elderly widow who lived in the house across the street. We'd exchange greetings occasionally, but nothing more. What can I do for you, Mrs. Pickering? I'm not sure I should interfere, but... She hesitated. I thought you should know. There are people living in your house. For months now, my heart skipped a beat. What kind of people? An old couple. I've seen them many times. Out shopping, working in the garden. At first I thought you'd rented the house, but then I noticed a young man who looked a lot like you. Your son? Yes, I struggled to get the word out. My son, Anthony. He comes every weekend with his wife. Young woman, blonde, always very fashionably dressed. Olivia. And the older couple? Do you know who they are? No, but they introduced themselves as new neighbors when we met at the grocery store. Said they'd moved out of town. I thought maybe they were related to you. Maybe, I lied, not wanting to let a stranger in on my family problems. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Pickering. You're welcome. She paused. They seem like nice people, you know. A man helped me with heavy bags once. But I thought you should know since it's your house. After talking to the neighbor, the picture became clear. Anthony had someone living in my house. Olivia's parents, apparently. The same Lloyd and Helena who'd always lived beyond their means and were always looking for ways to save money. The anger came in waves. How dare he? How could he betray my trust like that? A house that had been a shrine, a place of Eleanor's memory, had been turned into a shelter for strangers. People who had never respected me or my property. I grabbed the phone, intending to call Anthony and tell him what I thought. But then I stopped. Number. This required a more thorough approach. I wanted to see his face when I asked questions. I wanted to make sure he couldn't hide behind phone excuses. Instead, I called my lawyer, Howard Price. We had known each other for 30 years, and I trusted his judgment completely. Howard, I need to change my will. It's urgent. Something wrong, Harrison? Not yet, but it will be soon, I answered. When can you get the papers ready? For you, by tomorrow night. What exactly do you want to change? I explained my intentions. Howard listened silently, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. Are you sure? He asked when I had finished. It's a radical step, I'm absolutely sure. All right, I'll prepare all the necessary papers. Will you come by tomorrow at 6? I will. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange calmness. A plan began to form in my head. I'll call Anthony and tell him I'm leaving for a weekend antique auction in a neighboring state. That would give me cover for a surprise visit to the country house. And then, well, then we'll see how quickly houses of cards collapse. I spent the next week gathering information, called a few delivery services under the pretense of verifying the address. It was true someone was ordering groceries to my house on a regular basis. Contacted the satellite TV company. Sports channels had been hooked up at the request of Mr. Atwood Jr. 5 months ago. Looked at the itemized internet bills. Traffic was huge, especially in the evenings and on weekends. Thursday night, I called Anthony. I'm leaving for an auction in Rockford, I informed him. I'll be back Sunday night. Oh, good. I could hear the obvious relief in his voice. Have a good trip. Anything interesting you plan to buy? There will be a collection of Victorian clocks on display. Some of the pieces might be of interest to our clients. Sounds great, he coughed. Listen, Dad, about the country house. The roof is almost finished. Another week, 2 weeks at the most, and we'll be able to go there. Great. I tried to keep my voice neutral. Just in time for the start of the season, we exchanged a few more words and said goodbye. He didn't even suspect a trick. Friday, I picked up the paperwork from Howard. He tried one more time to talk me out of it. You might regret that decision, Harrison. I won't. Some lessons have to be tough, or they're useless. Whatever you say, he handed me a folder of paperwork. It's all ready, signed and legally flawless. You can reverse this decision at any time. Just let me know. Thank you, Howard. I appreciate your work. When I got home, I spread the documents out on the table and read them carefully once more. They were perfect, exactly what I wanted. Clear and unambiguous. I signed each page, then placed everything in a large, heavy paper envelope. I wrote Anthony's name on it and sealed it. Then I started packing. I put the envelope in my briefcase, packed a small duffel bag, enough to give the impression of leaving for the auction. Checked that all the keys to the country house were in place. Saturday morning, I loaded my stuff into the car and drove out of town. But instead of heading east toward Rockford, I drove north toward the lake, to my country house, the place Eleanor loved most in the world, the place her son had turned into a haven for strangers. I drove, gripping the steering wheel tightly and thinking about what I would say when I saw the unexpected guess, about how I would hand the envelope to Anthony, about the look on his face when he read the contents. Some lessons are meant to be tough. My son has thought for too long that he can control my life and my possessions, that he could betray my trust without consequence. The time of reckoning had come. The country house greeted me with a liveliness I hadn't seen there since Eleanor died. As I drove up, I noticed an unfamiliar silver sedan parked outside the garage, expensive, but relatively new. There was a garden hose in the driveway, and pots of flowers I hadn't bought were on the porch. This house had always been my sanctuary, a place where every detail reminded me of Eleanor, of our years together. Now it seemed alien. Even the air around it was different, as if the atmosphere itself had changed. I parked on the side of the road, some distance from the house. I needed to collect my thoughts, to calm my racing heart. The anger I'd been holding back all the way was now demanding to be released. But I knew that if I let it go, nothing good would come of it. Anger makes people weak, makes them make rash decisions, and I needed all the restraint I could muster. I took the envelope with the documents out of my briefcase and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I got out of the car and walked slowly toward the house. Each step was hard, as if my legs were filled with lead. The front door was unlocked, another violation of my rules. I always insisted on locking the house even when someone was inside. Safety first, I was fond of repeating. But now my house stood open to any passerby. I quietly entered the hallway. From inside, I could hear the sound of the TV working some kind of sports competition, judging from the announcer's comments and the cheers of the fans. It smelled like something fried, probably the lunch that was cooking in my kitchen. Taking a deep breath, I walked further into the living room and froze on the threshold. In front of the TV in my favorite chair sat Lloyd, Olivia's father, relaxed, in homemade clothes with a bottle of beer in his hand. My beer from my fridge. He didn't notice me right away, engrossed in the soccer match on my TV screen. "Goal!" he exclaimed, bouncing in his chair. "Did you see that, Helena?" What a kick! A woman's voice came from the kitchen. "I'm busy, darling." "You'll tell me later." And then Lloyd turned his head and saw me. His face changed instantly from joyful excitement to a mixture of fear and confusion. "Harrison," he choked on his beer. "What are you doing here?" "I live here," I answered coldly. "Unlike you." Lloyd stood up hastily, knocking over the bottle. The beer spilled over the wooden floor that Eleanor had so lovingly chosen and cared for. "We thought, Anthony said you were at the auction until Sunday." Obviously, Anthony was wrong. At that moment, Helena came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands with a kitchen towel, the one with the embroidered lavender bouquets that Eleanor had brought back from our trip to Provence. "Lloyd, what's that noise?" "Oh my God!" She froze when she saw me. "Harrison." What a, unexpected surprise. I looked around the living room. There were signs of their presence everywhere. Other people's things on my shelves, pictures of their family on my tables. Even the covers on the sofas had been replaced. They had completely taken over my house as if it belonged to them. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, turning to both of them. They looked at each other, clearly unsure of what to say. Finally, Helena stepped forward. "Harrison, it's not what you think." "What am I supposed to think? That you're staying here temporarily?" "Judging by the number of your belongings, temporarily has been going on for more than a month." "6," Lloyd muttered, lowering his eyes. 6 months, I repeated, feeling my insides grow cold. 6 months you've been living in my house without my knowledge or consent. "Anthony said you didn't mind," Helena added hastily. "Mom, he said you discussed it and you let us stay here until we found a new place to live." Anthony lied. I walked through the living room, trying not to look at the mess around me, and walked over to the fireplace. The mantelpiece had once held pictures. Eleanor and I's wedding, Anthony's birth, our family vacations. Now there were other people's pictures, Helena and Lloyd with Olivia, Anthony at some music festival, Olivia's parents at the beach. "Where are my pictures?" I asked without turning around. "We've kept them carefully," Helena hastened to assure me. "They're in a box in the closet, We just wanted to make it cozy. Comfort, I repeated, in someone else's house. I turned to them. They were standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as if preparing for defense. Lloyd was fidgeting with the TV remote. Helena was crumpling her towel. Well, I suppose Anthony and Olivia will be here soon. On the weekends, as usual? Yes, Helena nodded. They promised to be here for dinner. I'm making a roast. In my kitchen. With food bought with my money. We were reimbursing expenses. Lloyd was outraged. We gave Anthony money every month to pay the bills. I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. How much did you give him? Enough to cover 3 times the electricity, water, and heating bills? Enough to pay for satellite TV with extra sports channels? Lloyd remained silent. Of course, their reimbursement was symbolic, like everything else about finances in this family. I made my way to the couch and sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. They carefully lowered themselves into the chairs opposite. I'm not going to yell, I said calmly. I won't call the police right now, although I have every right to do so. You're trespassing on my property and living here without the owner's permission. It's a felony, in case you didn't know. But Anthony said, Helena began. Anthony doesn't own this house. I cut him off. I do. And I've never authorized anyone to live here but myself. I pulled an envelope from my inside pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. Give this to Anthony when he gets here. What is it? Lloyd asked, looking at the envelope like a snake ready to bite. Papers he needs to read, and you might want to familiarize yourself with their contents too. Helena hesitantly took the envelope. We'll be sure to pass it on. Harrison, is there any way we can discuss this whole situation? Over lunch? I've prepared more than enough. No, I'm up. I'm not having dinner with people who've been tricked into coming into my house. I'll be here tomorrow, and by then I expect to see only my relatives. You'll have to find another place to live. But we can't move out so soon, Lloyd exclaimed. We've got things, furniture. We can't just leave. You've had 6 months to find a place to live, I said, heading for the exit. 24 more hours isn't going to make a difference. And put my pictures back where they belong. Every single one of them. With those words, I left the house, got in my car, and drove away. It was only after I had driven a decent distance that I allowed myself to stop and catch my breath. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, but I had done what I had to do. Now I had to wait for Anthony's reaction. It didn't take long. I hadn't even gotten to the city when my phone rang. My son's name popped up on the screen. Yes, Anthony. Dad, what the hell? His voice sounded scared and angry at the same time. You were at the country house? Talking to Olivia's parents? Yes, I had that dubious pleasure. By the way, when were you going to tell me you'd put them in my house? A year from now? 2? Or weren't you planning on telling me at all? Yeah, it's temporary. They had financial problems. They had to sell the apartment. They were looking for a new place to live. But there was nothing suitable, and your house was empty most of the time. My house, I repeated. Do you even realize that it's my property? That you have no right to dispose of it? Goma, you always said that one day it would be mine. I'm just speeding things up a little bit. Speeded things up? I laughed. No, Anthony, you stopped it. Completely and utterly. What are you talking about? There was concern in his voice. Did you read the papers in the envelope? Not yet, we just pulled up to the house. Helena called hysterically, said you'd come by and left some envelope. Read them carefully, and then call me back. I hung up and continued on my way home. It was hard on my heart, but I knew I was doing the right thing. Some lessons need to be taught hard. At home, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my chair, waiting for the call. It was almost 2 hours before the phone rang again. You can't do this, Anthony said in lieu of a greeting. His voice trembled. You can't disinherit me. It's wrong. Why not? You're my son, but that doesn't give you a right to my property, especially when you show such blatant disrespect for my wishes and my property. I didn't do it for me, he exclaimed. Olivia's parents really had nowhere to go. Would you have left them on the street? Homeless? Don't exaggerate, Anthony. They're adults with jobs. They could have rented an apartment like millions of other people do. Instead, you decided to sneak them into my house, lie to my face, and pay their expenses with my money. And you wonder why I decided to change my will? There was a pause. I could hear Anthony breathing into the tube, heavy, as if after a run. It was Olivia, wasn't it? He finally said. You never accepted her. Always thought she was with me for the money. Don't put the blame on others, I replied. The decision to put her parents in my house was yours. The decision to lie to me was yours too. You're a grown man, Anthony. It's time to take responsibility for your actions. I can fix this, he said, a pleading tone in his voice. They'll move out tomorrow. I'll put everything back the way it was, pay for all the expenses. Just cancel the goddamn deed. 24 hours, Anthony. I'm coming to check on the house tomorrow. If your father-in-law and mother-in-law are still there, I'll call the police and file a trespassing charge, and I'll file an accessory after the fact against you. You wouldn't do that, he said, uncertainty in his voice. You wouldn't make your own son look like a criminal. You think? I took a sip of whiskey. You know, Anthony, I used to believe that family was the most important thing, that blood ties were unbreakable. But you proved me wrong. You betrayed my trust. You used my property without permission, lied to my face for months. So yes, I'm perfectly willing to go to the police if I have to. What about Mom? He went to the final argument. She'd want us to be a family. She'd want us to support each other. Don't you dare use her memory. My voice turned icy. Eleanor would never have approved of what you did. She believed in honesty and respect. Two things you don't seem to understand. Dad, please. 24 hours, Anthony. Not a minute more. I hung up the phone and finished my whiskey. I felt empty. There was no satisfaction in revenge, no relief at having spoken the truth. Only the bitterness of realizing how deep the gulf between me and my only son was. The phone rang again almost immediately. I thought it was Anthony again, but Olivia's name popped up on the screen. I hesitated to answer it, but then I took the call. Harrison, her voice sounded surprisingly calm. I think we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Olivia. You and Anthony knew what you were doing. You knew it was wrong, and you went ahead with it anyway. My parents were in a difficult situation. They had to sell their apartment to pay off their debts. They couldn't afford to rent in the city, and the country house stood empty. It seemed like a logical solution. The logical thing would have been to ask my permission, I replied. If you had come to me honestly and explained the situation, perhaps I would have agreed. But instead, you all decided to go behind my back. We knew you'd say no, she said bluntly. You've never made a secret of your relationship to my parents. And does that justify the deception? No, she sighed. No, it doesn't. We did wrong, and I apologize for my part in it. But Harrison, disinheriting Anthony is too drastic. You know the studio's barely afloat. Without your support, he could lose everything. He's already lost my trust. The rest is just material things. You've been clinging to your whole life, she said, bitterness slipping into her voice. Anthony told me how you always put business and money before family, above him. That's not true, I countered, feeling a stab of pain. I was working for my family, for Anthony's future, and he never appreciated that. He does, Olivia said softly. He just expresses it differently than you expect. He's proud of you, though he'll never admit it. I remained silent, not knowing what to say. Was there any truth to what she was saying, or was it just another manipulation? My parents are moving out tomorrow morning, Olivia continued. We've already found them a temporary place to stay, and we'll clean up the house, I promise. But please reconsider your decision about the inheritance. Not for me or my parents, but for Anthony, for the sake of your family. I'll think about it, I replied, surprised by my own words. Ashunariki. But first, I want to make sure my house is cleared and cleaned up. Fair enough, Olivia said. Thanks, Harrison. After the conversation, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking. Olivia's words had touched something deep inside. Perhaps I really had been too harsh. Perhaps changing my will had been an overreaction. But then I remembered Lloyd sitting in my chair, drinking my beer and watching my TV. How Helena had wiped her hands with Eleanor's towel. How they removed our family photos, replacing them with their own. How they used my house, my belongings, my money for months, without permission, without thanks, without respect. and I realized that my decision was the right one. It's not about money or possessions. It was about respect and honesty, two qualities that Eleanor valued and that were sorely lacking in our son and his new family. Tomorrow I'm going to go check on the house, and if everything was as Olivia had promised, maybe, just maybe, I would reconsider my decision about the inheritance. But something told me this story wasn't over. The drive back to the city seemed endless. The scenery flashed by outside the car window. Forests replaced fields. Fields replaced suburbs, but I hardly noticed the changes. My thoughts swirled around what had happened at the country house, around the conversation with Helena and Lloyd, around the calls I'd gotten from Anthony and Olivia. The decision to change the will wasn't spontaneous. It had been brewing inside me for a long time, ever since I'd begun to notice that Anthony was drifting further and further away from my values, from the principles I tried to teach him. Today's events were just the last straw. Back in my city apartment, I felt a strange sense of relief. Everything was in its proper place here. No one had touched my things or rearranged the furniture or removed Eleanor's pictures. This was my space, untouched by other people's hands. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the chair by the window. The cityscape outside the window had already turned evening colors. The lights of advertisements flickered in the twilight, people hurrying home after a day's work, an ordinary Saturday evening for thousands of Lee's Summit residents. And only in my life there was an earthquake. The phone was silent. Olivia hadn't called again after our conversation, and neither had Anthony. Perhaps they were discussing the situation among themselves, planning their next move. Or more likely, they were busy organizing their relative's move. 24 hours isn't a long time to haul 6 months' worth of luggage. I thought about what I would say tomorrow when I arrived to check on the house. Will I be as firm, or will I soften when I see an empty house? Would I really be ready to call the police if Helena and Lloyd were still there? And most importantly, am I ready to completely sever my relationship with my only son? I was distracted from my musings by the intercom ringing. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 9 o'clock at night. Who could it be? Yes, question mark, I answered, pressing the intercom button. Harrison, it's Olivia. Can I come upstairs? We need to talk. I hesitated. I didn't want to see my sister-in-law, but it seemed petty to refuse to talk to her. Anne, come on up, I said, pushing the button that opened the front door. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Olivia, pale, red-eyed, but still impeccably dressed and combed. Even in the midst of a family crisis, she'd never let herself look sloppy. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She walked into the living room, stopping at the window. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts. Anthony doesn't know I'm here, she said finally. He wouldn't approve. So why did you come? Olivia turned to me. Her face seemed older than usual in the light of the lamps, the fine lines around her eyes, the crease between her eyebrows. To try to make things right, not for my parents, they've already made it clear they need to move out, and not for my own sake, for Anthony, and for you. I silently pointed to the chair and sat down across from her. Olivia sank to the edge of the seat, as if ready to jump up at any moment. Speak, I said. What happened? It's wrong, in every way. My parents shouldn't have lived in your house without permission. Anthony shouldn't have kept it from you. I shouldn't have allowed it. But you did, I pointed out. What's more, you probably initiated it. Olivia pressed her lips together. Circumstances were the instigator. My parents really had nowhere to go. They'd sold the apartment to pay off my father's debts. Another bad investment, she grinned bitterly. They were going to rent, but the prices in the city, you know how expensive everything is these days. And Anthony suggested your country house. I finished for her. Yeah, he said you're hardly ever there anyway, that it's only temporary until they get back on their feet. 6 months is a long time for temporary. Olivia lowered her gaze. They were trying to find something suitable, really tried, but every time something didn't work out. The price was too high, the neighborhood wasn't right, the lease terms were unacceptable. She stammered. I know how that sounds, like an excuse, but they were really looking. And all this time, none of you thought to just tell me the truth? Ask my permission? We were afraid you'd say no, Olivia answered honestly. You've never hidden your feelings from my parents. And in the end, it just ended up making things worse. I stood up, walked over to the bar, and poured myself another whiskey. I didn't offer it to Olivia. She never drank hard liquor. Worse, I said, returning to my seat, you've completely undermined my trust. All of you. I know, and I'm sorry. I really am. But Harrison, disinheriting Anthony, it's too much. He's your son, your blood, the only family you have left. The family that's been lying to me for months. People make mistakes, Olivia said softly. Everyone makes mistakes. Haven't you ever made mistakes? Of course I have. Everyone makes mistakes. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate deception, a complete disregard for my feelings and my property. What Anthony did was not a mistake. It was a choice, a conscious choice to lie to me and use my property for his own purposes. Olivia was silent, obviously realizing that this argument wasn't working. Then she changed tactics. You know, Anthony is a lot like you, more than you realize, just as stubborn, just as principled. He never admits his mistakes either. If he were like me, he'd know the value of hard work and honesty. He does, Olivia countered. He just expresses it differently. His studio is his brainchild, his passion. He puts his heart and soul into it, works day and night. Isn't that the same thing you did with your stores? I snorted. The comparison was inappropriate. I built the business from scratch, with no help from anyone. Anthony got the startup capital from me, connections through my contacts, even found the studio space with my help. There's a difference between building a business with your own hands and getting everything on a platter. He didn't get everything on a silver platter. Olivia sounded annoyed. Yes, you helped at the start, but the rest of it was his doing. His talent, his hard work, his perseverance. And yet the studio is barely afloat, I said. 6 years and no steady profit. The music business is tough, especially for independent studios. But he doesn't give up. Doesn't ask you for money for a studio, even though he could. That was the truth. Whatever grievances I had with Anthony, he never asked for money for his business after the initial investment. He asked for money for personal needs, apartment, car, vacations, but not for the studio. It was something he was really proud of and wanted to prove he could run it on his own. Olivia, seeing that her words resonated with him, continued, You know, he doesn't tell anyone, but sometimes he works for free with talented musicians who don't have the money to record, helps them create demos, send them submissions to contests. Some of them then become famous and come back to the studio as clients. He knows how to see potential and invest in it. Just like you. I smiled involuntarily. That was really my approach. To see value where others saw only old things. Finding treasure among the junk. Perhaps that was where Anthony and I were really alike. Olivia, noticing my reaction, continued more confidently. Harrison, I'm not asking you to forget about what happened. Or forgive us right now. Just don't make drastic decisions in anger. Give everyone time to cool down. Think, including yourself. She was quiet for a moment, then added more quietly. And one more thing. I didn't want to say, but you should know. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. We were going to tell you next week when I have my first major checkup. That news hit me like a shoe on the head. A grandson or granddaughter, Anthony's baby, a continuation of the family. Something Eleanor had dreamed of, but never lived to see. Congratulations, I squeezed out. Anthony must be happy. He's thrilled, Olivia smiled, and scared to death at the same time. He keeps asking if he's going to be a good father. He will be, I said suddenly. He had a good example. Eleanor was a great mother. And you're a good father, Olivia added softly. Despite all the disagreements, Anthony knows that. He wants his child to know his grandfather. He wants you to have the relationship you didn't have with him. I turned away to the window, not wanting her to see the emotion on my face. A grandson, a new life, a new chance. But then I remembered the lie, of the betrayal, how they'd all been lying to me together for months, and how easily Olivia was now using the news of the pregnancy to manipulate me. You came here to tell me this on purpose now, I said, turning to her again, using the baby as a bargaining chip. Olivia flinched as if she'd been slapped. No, I just thought you should know that it might help you see the bigger picture. It's not just about you and Anthony now. It's about the future of the whole family. What if I hadn't found out about your little house scam? When would you have told me about the pregnancy? After you gave birth? Or when the baby was a year old? It's not fair. Olivia's eyes brimmed with tears. We were always going to tell you about the baby. This is different, isn't it? I think it's part of the same picture. You're deciding what I know and what I don't know, what's better or worse for me. The three of you, Anthony, and your parents, you decide you can control my property and my life, and now you come here with news of a baby, expecting me to melt and forget everything. I never thought you'd forget, Olivia countered, but I hoped you could forgive, for the future, for the sake of your grandson or granddaughter. I shook my head. It's not about forgiveness, Olivia. It's about trust. It's about respect. You've all shown you have no respect for me or my boundaries. How can I trust you after that? How can I be sure that you don't just see me as a purse on legs or free real estate? I am not, she exclaimed. We appreciate you, Harrison. Appreciate your wisdom, your experience. Anthony is proud to have you as his father, even if he doesn't show it. It's a strange way to show pride, deceiving me for months. Olivia lowered his eyes. I can't justify what we did. I can only apologize and ask you to give us a chance to make it right. I sighed. Part of me wanted to soften, to accept the apology, to start fresh, especially now that there was a grandson or granddaughter on the horizon, a child who wasn't guilty of anything. But the other part, the stronger part, reminded me of the betrayal, of the disrespect, of the fact that Anthony never seemed to have learned the most important lesson: appreciate what you have and respect other people's property. I'll come check on the house tomorrow, I said finally. If your parents are out and everything is in order, we'll talk more. But I can't promise I'll change my mind about the inheritance. Olivia nodded, realizing that I couldn't do more than that right now. Thank you for listening, she stood up. They'll move out. I'll see to it personally. I hope that when you see your grandson or granddaughter, you'll remember that family is the most important thing, no matter what happens. I walked her to the door. When she was already standing on the threshold, I couldn't resist asking, have you thought of a name yet? Olivia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd had all evening. If it's a girl, we want to call it Eleanor. That was a low blow, using my late wife's name. Did Olivia know how much it hurt? Or was it really a way for her to honor her mother-in-law? Eleanor would have loved it, I said, surprised at myself. When the door closed behind Olivia, I went back into the living room and poured myself another whiskey. I definitely deserved a drink tonight. A baby, a continuation of the Atwood family. Eleanor would be happy. She'd always wanted grandchildren, often talked about how she would spoil them, read them stories, teach them how to bake her famous chocolate chip cookies. She didn't live to see that moment, but I did, only to discover that my only son is using my property without asking, lying to my face, and his wife trying to manipulate my feelings with the news of my pregnancy. This is not the family Eleanor and I dreamed of. I sat back in my chair, looking at my wife's picture on the dresser. Eleanor was smiling from the picture, the same smile that had once lit up my life. What would you do if you were me? I mentally asked her. There was no answer, of course, but I knew my wife. She had always believed in forgiveness, in new beginnings, in love being stronger than offense, and yet even her patience had limits. Even she did not tolerate outright disrespect. Anthony had never understood the true value of things, not the value in dollars, which is what I was trying to teach him. No, he didn't understand the emotional value, the historical value, the value of the memories associated with objects and places. To him, a country house was just real estate, vacant, unused, suitable for relatives to move in. To me, it was a shrine to Eleanor's memory, a place where every corner held her presence. How could he not realize that? I thought about the last conversation I'd had with Eleanor at the hospital. They don't understand the price of things. Teach them. At the time, I thought she was talking about money, about financial responsibility. Now I realized it was about more than that, about the value of family, loyalty, honesty, about how some things can't be bought or sold, can't be used at will without consequences. Perhaps changing the will was too drastic a step, but how else to get through to Anthony? How do you make him realize that every action has consequences? That you can't just take what you want without respect for other people's feelings and rights? The phone jingled. A message came from Anthony. Mom told you about the baby. I hope you are happy to be a grandfather. Parents will have the house cleared out by morning. Sorry for everything. A short message. No emotion. No attempt to explain or truly apologize. Typical of Anthony to get away with the minimum of words, thinking it was enough. I didn't answer. I'm going to check on the house tomorrow. See if he kept his promise. And only then would I decide what to do next. With the will, with our relationship, with a future grandson or granddaughter. One thing I knew for sure was that some lessons were going to be tough. And it seemed the time had come to teach that lesson to my son. The night passed restlessly. I woke up several times, my thoughts jumbled and jumbled with fragments of dreams. In one of them, Eleanor was standing in our country house in front of the fireplace, saying something insistently to me, but I couldn't make out the words. In the other, Anthony was a little boy, crying after losing his favorite toy, and I couldn't comfort him because there was a glass wall between us. In the morning, I called Howard Price. My lawyer and longtime friend had agreed to go with me to the country house. Are you sure you need a witness? He asked. Maybe we should give the family a chance to settle this privately. I don't believe in promises anymore, I replied, especially from my son and his family. Howard sighed heavily, but didn't argue. We agreed to meet at the house at noon. The drive to the country house seemed shorter this time, perhaps because I was focused and centered, unlike yesterday's confusion and anger. I knew exactly what I was going to do. Check to see if Olivia's parents had left, look around the house, assess the damage. If they were still there, I'd call the police immediately, without further conversation or warning. If they're gone, I'll make a list of everything that needs to be repaired or replaced and send the bill to Anthony. It would be his last chance to show that he understood the seriousness of the situation. Howard was already waiting for me when I pulled up in front of the house. His distinguished black car was parked at the curb. He was standing on the porch, looking at the front of the building. It's a beautiful house, he said as I got out of the car. Eleanor did a great job on it. She put her heart into it. I looked at the curtained windows. I hope there's something left of her work. We walked up the steps. I took out my keys and unlocked the door. The hallway was quiet. No TV, no talking, no footsteps. That's a good sign. Looks like they really moved out, Howard said. I nodded, but didn't jump to conclusions. I'd let myself be fooled yesterday. Today I was going to check every nook and cranny. We walked into the living room, and I froze at the threshold. The room looked empty. Not just empty, but devastated. The furniture had been moved out of place. There were light stains on the walls where paintings had been, and the floor had deep scratches from moving furniture. Oh my God, Howard muttered behind me. I moved on in silence, looking around the house room by room. It was the same pattern everywhere. Signs of long residence, carelessness, and hasty departure. In the kitchen, the sink was clogged with dirty dishes, the refrigerator was left open and empty, and there were dried stains on the countertops. In the bathrooms, lime scale on all surfaces, mold in the corners of the shower stalls. Bedrooms had torn curtains, mattresses with spillage marks. But worst of all was my office. The bookshelves were empty. The antique editions I'd collected over the years were gone. The antique globe, a gift from a business partner in London, was missing. The safe was open and empty. This isn't just disrespect anymore, Howard said quietly, looking around the office. This is theft. You should call the police. I nodded silently, too shocked to speak. The betrayal was deeper than I'd realized. Not just the use of the house, but the appropriation of my personal belongings, many of which had sentimental rather than material value. I'll take pictures for the report, Howard said, pulling out his phone. We'll need proof. He methodically walked around the house, photographing every room, every sign of damage or missing property. I followed him like I was in a fog, trying to realize the magnitude of what had happened. In the bedroom that Eleanor and I had once shared, I stopped at the dresser. All the drawers were pulled out and empty. The top shelf where Eleanor's jewelry box had once stood was now empty. I felt everything shatter inside. They took her jewelry, I said to Howard. All of Eleanor's jewelry. The things I was going to give to our... I paused, remembering Olivia's pregnancy. Jewelry that could go to my granddaughter if she had a baby girl. Things that held the memory of the woman whose name the girl might bear. We'll include it in the application, Howard said calmly, but I could see the anger in his eyes. He'd known Eleanor as long as he'd known me, had been at our wedding, had baptized Anthony. For him, what was happening was also a personal tragedy. When we finished looking around the house, I walked out into the backyard. Eleanor's rose garden, her pride and joy, was in disrepair. The bushes were uncut, overgrown with weeds, and many of the plants had withered without proper care. The gardener I was paying was clearly not doing his job, or, more likely, the money meant for him was going to other things. Howard and I were sitting at the garden table, making a list of the missing items and assessing the damage, when an elderly woman, the same neighbor who had called me, Mrs. Pickering, approached the fence. "Mr. Atwood, I see you've arrived after all. How are you? How's your family? Hello, Mrs. Pickering. I've come to the fence. I can't say I'm very well, I'm sorry to say." She looked around the neglected garden. "Yes, I've noticed the roses are hardly tended. It's a pity. Your wife was so fond of them. Had you noticed for a long time that there were other people living in the house? I asked you bluntly." Mrs. Pickering hesitated. "Well, they moved in about last March. I thought you knew. Your son introduced them as his wife's parents. Said you let them live here." "In March?" I asked back, feeling a chill go through me. "March of this year." No, last year," she corrected. "They'd been living here for over a year, maybe a year and a half." I exchanged glances with Howard. A year and a half, not 6 months as Lloyd had claimed. A year and a half of deception, a year and a half of using my house without my knowledge. "Were they, good neighbors?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "Oh, on the whole, yes," Mrs. Pickering nodded. "A little noisy sometimes, especially when they had guests, but mostly polite. Although there was one occasion..." She hesitated. "What sort of occasion?" "Last summer they threw a big party. Lots of people. Loud music until the wee hours of the morning. Some of the guests broke my mailbox and trampled the flower bed. I talked to Mr. Lloyd the next day and he apologized, promised to fix it, but he never did. Typical of Olivia's parents. Lots of promises, little action. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Pickering." I nodded politely. "I hope you weren't too bothered." "Oh no, they were generally normal neighbors. I was just surprised to see them leave in a hurry last night. Loaded their stuff in the van and left in the middle of the night. I thought maybe something had happened." "It did," I confirmed. "But don't worry, it's under control." We said goodbye and I went back to Howard, who was already finishing the inventory. "A year and a half," I said, sinking into a chair. "They've lived here for a year and a half, Howard. I had no idea." "That makes a difference," he said thoughtfully. "The statute of limitations on certain offenses..." "I'm not interested in legal technicalities," I interrupted him. "I'm interested in how my own son could lie to me for so long, how he could let his relatives destroy the house that was so dear to his mother." Howard put his hand on my shoulder. "I know how much it hurts you right now, but try to think clearly. What do you want to do next? File a police report? Seek damages through the courts? Or try to resolve this in the family circle?" I looked around the neglected garden, the ruined house, the place where I'd once been so happy with Eleanor, and I made a decision. "I'll sell the house," I said firmly. "I'll find a good realtor, make the necessary repairs and sell it. Let someone live here who will appreciate the place. Take care of it." "Are you sure?" Howard looked at me with concern. "This house has meant so much to you and Eleanor." "That's why I can't leave it," I replied. "Every time I come here, I won't remember the happy moments with Eleanor, but my son's betrayal. This place is tainted, Howard. It's best to let him go." My friend nodded, realizing the decision had been made. "What about reporting him to the police?" I wondered. Part of me wanted to punish them all to the fullest. Anthony, Olivia, her parents. Prosecute them for theft, for trespassing, for willful damage to property. But the other part of me remembered the unborn child. A grandson or granddaughter I may never see if I sever my relationship with my son permanently. I'll file a theft report, I finally decided. But I won't name any specific suspects. I'll let the police handle it. If they find evidence against Lloyd and Helena, well, that's their problem. If they don't, I'll at least get the paperwork for the insurance company. And Anthony? Howard asked cautiously. I'll deal with Anthony separately, I answered. Personal things remain personal. We finished the paperwork and left the house. I locked the door, but I knew I wouldn't come back here as owner. My life with this house was over, as perhaps was my life as a father. On my way into town, I called the police and arranged a visit to the station. Then I contacted a realtor who had been recommended to me by a business associate. We made an appointment for the next day. Howard dropped me off at my city apartment. Are you sure you can handle this on your own? He asked. I can stay if I need to. Thanks, friend, but I'm fine, I replied. I have a lot to think about. He nodded, understanding my desire to be alone. I'll prepare all the necessary documents for the police and the insurance company. Harrison, whatever you decide about Anthony, remember you can always change the will again, at any time. I shook his hand gratefully and entered the building. I was greeted by silence in the apartment, familiar, almost cozy. Nothing had changed here. No intrusion, no betrayal, only Eleanor's picture on the dresser and the emptiness in my heart. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the chair by the window. The phone was silent. Neither Anthony nor Olivia had called to inquire about the results of my visit to the country house. Perhaps they already knew from Lloyd and Helena what condition they'd left the house in. Perhaps they were waiting for my reaction. Or more likely, they had hoped that it would sort itself out somehow, that the anger would pass, that I would eventually accept it, as I had done so many times before. But this time it was different. This time they had gone too far. I thought about Eleanor's stolen jewelry, about her rings, necklaces, earrings, not so much valuable materially, but priceless emotionally, things I was going to pass on to future generations, about the memories that had been taken from me. I thought about the rose garden she had created with such love, about each bush personally chosen, the beds planned so that the blooms would last from early spring to late fall, about the place where she had been so happy and which was now overgrown with weeds. I thought of the house itself, the walls that held the echoes of our voices, the floors that remembered our footsteps, the windows through which we watched sunsets together. The place that had been our project together, our pride, our sanctuary. It had all been desecrated, destroyed, stolen by the people I should have trusted the most. The decision to sell the house didn't come easy. Part of me screamed that I was betraying Eleanor's memory by giving up the place she had loved so much. But in my mind, I knew that the real betrayal wasn't me. I was simply trying to save what could still be saved, my memories of this place, which were now tainted by my son's betrayal. The new owners, whoever they are, will start with a clean slate. Perhaps they will revive the rose garden. Perhaps they will fill the house with the laughter of children. Perhaps they will create their own happy memories there. And that would be the best outcome for a place that could no longer be my home. I pulled out a photo album, one of the few I kept in the city apartment. It contained snapshots of the first years of life in the country house. Eleanor in the garden, with garden shears in her hands and a straw hat on her head. A teenage Anthony helping her plant rose bushes. Myself, 20 years younger, building a gazebo that is now probably ruined too. Happy moments captured on paper. Moments that no one could steal or ruin. I closed the album and returned it to the shelf, then pulled out my phone and texted a quick message to Anthony. Been to the house. Saw what you did. I'm selling it. Don't call me. There was no response. I wasn't expecting one. What could he say? What excuses could a man have for letting his relatives destroy his mother's house, steal her jewelry, destroy her rose garden? I turned off the phone and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day when I would begin to let go of the past and build a new future, a future without betrayal and lies, a future perhaps without a son, but with my dignity and self-respect intact. Eleanor would understand me. She always has. 6 months is a long time when every day is like the last, and surprisingly short when your life changes completely. In the past 6 months, I sold a country house to a young family with 2 children. They fell in love with it at first sight, despite its deplorable condition. An engineer and a teacher, both with burning eyes and grand plans for restoration. I gave them a good discount in exchange for a promise to revitalize the rose garden. They agreed enthusiastically. The wife turned out to be a gardening enthusiast. I sold my city apartment too. Too many memories, too many ghosts of the past. Now I lived in a new-to-me neighborhood in Lee's Summit, quiet, respectable, overlooking the river. A spacious apartment on the top floor of a modern building with panoramic windows and a terrace. Nothing in common with my previous home, and it was exactly what I needed. New apartment, new furniture, new life. Only Eleanor's picture on the bedside table remained the same, the only link to the past that I didn't want to break. Anthony and I hadn't spoken in months. No calls, no texts, no meetings. I knew from Howard that the son had hired a lawyer to contest the change of will, but then abruptly abandoned the idea. Maybe he realized it was futile because the paperwork was impeccable. Perhaps he simply didn't want further scandal. Or more likely, Olivia had convinced him not to make things worse. From the same Olivia, through mutual acquaintances, I learned that they had a baby girl. Healthy, strong, with my eyes, according to those who saw her. They named her Eleanor, as they had planned. Little Ellie, my granddaughter, whom I may never see again. Sometimes on particularly quiet evenings, I thought about her, about how I could hold her in my arms, tell her stories, show her antique trinkets from the store, about how I could teach her to appreciate the beauty of antique things, to respect history, to cherish memories. All the things I couldn't teach her father. But I kept those thoughts from me. You can't undo what you've done. The bridges are burned. And to be honest, I wasn't sure I wanted to rebuild them. In the months since, I'd completely overhauled my life. I cut back on my work hours, traveled more, and started reading books I'd never gotten around to before. At 74, I was finally learning to live for myself, not for a business, not for a legacy, not for a family that had never appreciated my sacrifices. That morning I woke up early, as usual. The habit of getting up at the crack of dawn hadn't disappeared over the years, though I now had the luxury of taking my time. I brewed some coffee and went out onto the terrace. The October morning was cool but clear. I watched the first rays of sunlight coloring the river in golden tones and thought that life, despite everything, is beautiful. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting visitors, especially at such an early hour. When I opened the door, I saw a messenger with an envelope. "Mr. Atwood?" he asked, checking the form. "Urgent delivery for you. Sign here, please." I signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. There were no identifying marks on the envelope, just my name and address printed on the printer. Opening it, I pulled out a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was familiar. Anthony's. I hadn't seen his handwriting in months, but I'd recognize it from 1,000. The same sharp angles of the letters, the same way of putting the dots a little higher than they should be, the same slight slant to the left. "Dear Papa," he wrote, "I know you don't want to see or hear from me. I know you probably won't even finish reading this letter, and I understand why. What I've done is unforgivable. I betrayed your trust. I insulted my mom's memory. I let people who didn't deserve your kindness take advantage of your property. I'm not looking for excuses. There are none. I was weak, letting Olivia and her parents convince me that it was just a vacant house, that Dad doesn't go there anyway. I knew it wasn't true. I knew how much that house meant to you, the memories associated with it. So I said yes anyway. First for a month, then for 2, and then it was too late to come clean. When you found out the truth, I was hoping it could be fixed, that I could just move Olivia's parents out, clean house, and you'd forgive me. But I didn't realize the magnitude of what they'd done. I didn't realize how much they destroyed the place my mom had created with so much love. It wasn't until I saw the house after they left, saw the empty shelves in the study, Mom's missing jewelry, the abandoned garden. Only then did I realize what I'd done. And you know what the worst part was? I couldn't tell if Olivia's parents had taken those things or just thrown them away. They swear they didn't take anything, but I don't know who to believe anymore. I've been trying to find my mom's jewelry, search their new apartment when they didn't know, check pawn shops in town, even hired a private investigator, to no avail. If they took it, they've already gotten rid of the evidence. Dad, I know that no words can undo what I did. I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm only asking to see you, just once, to say all this in person, to look you in the eye, and to see your granddaughter. She's 4 months old. She looks just like her mom. The same eyes, the same curve of her eyebrows. And she looks like you, too. The same stubborn chin. I'll be at Marco's this Friday from 2 to 4. I'll be waiting, hoping you'll come. If you don't, I'll understand. I won't bother you again. Your son, Anthony. I reread the letter twice, then slowly folded it and walked over to the fireplace. It was modern, electric, but with an imitation of a real fire. I turned it on, waited for it to flare up, and put the letter into the flames. The paper first curled around the edges, then burst into flames and turned to ash in a few seconds. Symbolic. Like everything in our relationship with Anthony. A bright flash and then only ash and bitterness. The letter was sincere, I had no doubt about that. Anthony was truly remorseful, perhaps truly realized what he had done, but it was too late. Some actions are impossible to forgive, especially when a person does not fully understand what he did wrong. And Anthony didn't. Yes, he regretted the missing things, the ruined house, the lost trust, but he still didn't realize the main thing, that he had betrayed not just material possessions, but a memory. The memory of Eleanor, of our life together, of the values we had tried to instill in him. If he'd realized that, he wouldn't have suggested we meet at the cafe. He would have known that some wounds are too deep to heal over a cup of coffee in a public place. He would have realized that showing me my granddaughter was not a solution to a problem, but an attempt at manipulation. Using an innocent child as a bridge to reconciliation is what Olivia would do, not Anthony. At least not the Anthony I knew. Maybe he's changed. Perhaps the birth of his daughter had really turned something around in him. But for me, it was too late. Too much pain. Too much betrayal. Some things can't be forgiven, even if you really want to forgive. After breakfast, I headed to my main antique store. I had rarely been there the last few months, having turned over day-to-day management to Noah Hammond, my assistant and partner of the last 15 years. A smart young man who started with me as a simple salesman after college and grew to become the de facto manager of a chain of stores. Reliable, honest, with excellent taste and a flair for rare things. A man I trusted more than my own son. The store greeted me with the familiar smell of old books, furniture polish, and the light perfume used by our consultant, Veronica. The bell over the door jingled, and Noah peeked out of the back room. "Harrison," he glowed. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you today. Thought I'd stop by and see how things were going." I shook his hand. "I hope you didn't ruin anything during my absence." "Only your reputation as the toughest boss in town," Noah grinned. The staff almost stopped flinching at the sound of the bell. We both laughed. Noah knew that behind the stern exterior, I always valued my employees and cared about them. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I asked. "In the office." He nodded, said something quickly to Veronica, and we went up to the second floor, where my office was located. It was a small room filled with bookcases, with a massive antique desk in the center and a comfortable leather chair. I hadn't been here in months, but everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Even the calendar on the desk showed the same month apparently. Noah didn't dare touch personal items. "Sit down," I pointed to the visitor's chair. "How are things going? Not in reports, but in substance." Noah sat down, squared his shoulders. "Not bad, to be honest. We closed the third quarter with a profit, despite the general downturn in the antiques market. The new marketing strategy we discussed in the spring worked. Online sales were up 20%, and we also signed a contract with that museum in Chicago I told you about." "Great," I nodded. "What about the new space for the branch on the north side of town?" "The lease is signed, and renovations will start next week. If everything goes according to plan, we'll be open by Christmas." I watched Noah intently as he talked business. Confident, competent, with the twinkle in his eye of a man who loved what he did. Just like I was when I was his age. A man who cared about the fate of the business I'd spent a lifetime building. "Noah," I interrupted him halfway through, "I have a proposition for you, or rather, a solution." He fell silent, looking at me with slight surprise. "A solution?" I opened a desk drawer and pulled out a folder of documents. They were prepared 2 weeks ago. I was just waiting for the right moment. I'm handing over management of the store chain to you. Completely. With ownership. Noah stared at me, unblinking. He didn't seem sure he'd heard me correctly. You? What? You heard right. I slid the folder toward him. It's all in here. A deed of gift for the controlling interest in the company, a power of attorney to manage all assets, bank details. From today, the company, Atwood Antiques, yours. With all the rights and responsibilities that come with it. Noah opened the folder, reviewed the first document, then the second. His hands trembled slightly. Harrison, I don't know what to say. This is too generous. I can't accept a gift like that. It's not a gift. I shook my head. It's a passing of the baton. You've earned it, Noah. 15 years of dedicated service, the last 5 of which you've basically run the entire business. I'm just formalizing what already exists de facto. But this is your baby, a life's work. It was, I corrected. Now it's your brainchild, your life's work. I'm old, Noah. I'm 74 years old. It's time to let go of the reins while I'm still able to enjoy my freedom. Noah slowly went through the documents as if he still couldn't believe what was happening. What about your son? Shouldn't he? My son made his choice a long time ago, I interrupted him, and that choice did not include the antique business. He has his life, I have mine, and I choose to give the business to someone who truly appreciates and understands it. You. Noah looked up at me. Tears glistened in his eyes. I won't let you down, Harrison. I swear it. I'll keep every tradition, every principle you've taught me. I know, I smiled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have offered you this. Now sign the papers, and that'll be the end of it. He signed the papers, still in mild shock at what was happening. I took my copy and put it in my briefcase. There is one condition, I added when the formalities were completed. You keep me on as a consultant with a token salary of $1 a year. And you let me go into the stores once in a while, just to breathe in that antique smell. Noah laughed more confidently. As much as you want. This office will always be yours, Harrison. And all the stores too. No, I shook my head. They're yours now. Completely yours. I'm just an old friend dropping in for a cup of tea. We discussed a few more details of the management transition, then went down to the sales floor. I wanted to inspect the new arrivals before I left. In the far corner of the hall, among the newly acquired photographs in antique frames, I saw a familiar face. My heart skipped a beat. I stepped closer, taking the photograph in my hands. It was Eleanor, young, smiling, in a light summer dress, against a lake. I didn't remember this picture, didn't remember ever seeing it. Where did this come from? I asked Noah, who was standing next to me. It's from a new shipment, bought at an auction of some old lady's estate, recently deceased. A whole album of old photographs, mostly landscapes of the Lake District. This one was among them. I turned the frame over. On the back was an inscription in faded ink. Eleanor by the Lake, summer 1970. Photo by G.E. I took this picture. A year before we were married, during a picnic by the lake. I was just starting to get into photography then, bought a used Polaroid and carried it everywhere. Eleanor laughed at my enthusiasm, but posed with gusto. How did this photo end up in the album of an elderly woman I didn't know? I didn't know and, frankly, didn't want to know. What was important was that she came back to me. A small miracle, a small sign of fate. How much is it worth? I asked. Free for you, Noah answered. That's your wife, isn't it? I recognized her from the picture in your office. Yes, I nodded. Eleanor, take her. Consider it the first gift from the new owner. I smiled and carefully tucked the photograph into my briefcase next to my papers. Thank you, Noah, for everything. As I walked out of the store, I felt strangely light. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had finally fallen from my shoulders. The business I'd spent a lifetime building was now in good hands. The house that held the memory of my happy years with Eleanor had new caring owners. Even the city apartment where I had lived most of my life now belonged to a young couple starting out. I got rid of everything that connected me to the past, everything but memories and photographs, and it was the right thing to do. My cell phone rang in my pocket. I pulled it out, Glanced at the screen. It was Anthony. For the first time in 6 months, he decided to call me directly, not through intermediaries or letters. Probably wanted to make sure I'd gotten his message. Maybe try again to talk me into a meeting. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone and tucked it away in my pocket. A cab was waiting in the driveway of my house. I had arranged it the day before. The trip to the airport had been planned long ago. In the trunk, there was already a suitcase with the essentials. The rest of my possessions I had sold off or given to charity. In an envelope in the inside pocket of my jacket was a plane ticket to Rome, the first stop on my trip around the world. Cities Eleanor and I had always dreamed of visiting together, but never had the time. Places where I could start over, without the weight of the past, without the bitterness of betrayal. I got into a cab and gave the airport address. As the car pulled away, I took one last look back at the house that had become my refuge for the past few months. Another stop on a long journey, another chapter to turn.